Support for Faith on Trial and Iowa Catholic Radio provided in part by Imogene Ingredients.
Our freedom of conscience and religion is being challenged by laws and regulations imposed by secular society. It's time to hear from the top Christian litigators in the nation who have come forward to tell us the truth and help us defend our faith.
Hear ye, hear ye. All rise. Faith on Trial with Defender of the Faith, Deacon Mike Manno, is in session.
And welcome once again to Faith on Trial, where we examine the influence of law and society on people of faith. I'm Deacon Mike Manno, your host, and I'm here in the studio with Gina Noll, our co-host. And Gina, how are you this morning?
I'm very good, Deacon Mike.
And I should say that it's morning when we tape this.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, we always tape it on Thursday mornings, and just so that people know. And I think most people do know that we tape.
That they're recorded now and no longer live.
Well, we're live on tape.
Yes.
We're live on tape, yeah.
I'm quite alive. The weather's getting so nice. We're getting into my favorite season.
It is.
Yeah.
I planted some new radishes over the week. I had a new bunch of radishes.
Is this the right time of the year to plant stuff?
I think I got another set of radishes to go. My peppers are still coming. I don't know what's happening to my onions. The last group of lettuce I had in there just didn't come up, but the radishes have. So we'll see how that goes.
Very good.
Yeah, I like radishes. Put them on the salad all the time. If I had lettuce, have the lettuce and radishes from my little...
From your little garden.
Yeah. Not much of a garden, but it's, yeah.
Our neighbor grew lettuce, and it was so abundant, they were kind enough to share, and it was delicious.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's very good.
Yes, very good. I love that. All different varieties. Very good.
And your daughter is back in school at Iowa State? Yeah,
yes. The house is open, except we seem to get our friends and family who need help with their animals while they're on vacation. So our house isn't completely quiet. We seem to have one or two dogs now and again. In fact, I'm getting rid of the last one from our August batch today. So, very busy place.
With the cat, we decided not to get another dog. A female cat, and she's not very amenable to outside people. We figured just let her be.
Well,
let her be.
It is a big responsibility to have a pet. And when
I've
I'm
had
ready,
them all my life.
Yeah, it's kind of like grandkids. When their owners come home, I'm glad they're gone.
Yeah.
I do love having them, but I'm glad to give them back.
Grandkids are easy because you only have them temporarily.
Exactly. Same with dog sitting.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. I had somebody contact me over the weekend looking for a place to board her dog for a couple of months.
And they called you?
And she called me. I don't think she called me to ask me if I would board the dog, but she called me to let me know what she was doing.
I see.
And all that. So there's not much I can do. Dog's not in town, and so.
Got it. Well, Ginger? Yeah, Ginger? Gilligan.
Gilligan.
Yeah, Gilligan is safe from that dog then.
Yeah. She could have been a Ginger because I named her before I knew she was a girl. But Gilligan I think is a good name for a cat, especially a clumsy one. Yeah.
Yep.
And that's what she is.
Appropriate.
All right, got a good show today.
Yeah, I see. We got some good guests.
That's right. We have Mike Gonzalez, who is from the Heritage Foundation, who's been with us many times before. He's one of the senior fellows there. And we like Mike. He always has something interesting to talk about.
And he's brilliant.
And he is. And he's going to talk about the comeback of the critical race theory, what that may mean for us, and that's something that we should.
I did not know that there was a group of educators who have meetings every year about this sort of thing. So I'll be anxious to find out, A, how he knows so much about what went on at that meeting, and B, how those meetings are going and if they're growing.
Yeah, if he knows what's going on in these meetings, how come he's not working for the CIA so that we know what's going on? All right.
There's a lot more I want to know.
That's right. And then William Duncan from the Sutherland Institute, who's talking about how UCLA became a bigoted institution or a bigoted example of what's going on, and that's due to all the Jewish folks that weren't allowed to go to school. Remember when they were all blocked out, and UCLA did nothing. So we're going to talk about that with him.
Well, and interesting, over the weekend when I listened to a lot of the political shows, I'd actually heard somebody describing how the bigotry in the professorships at UCLA, how the majority of the professors are very liberal, and they have a lot of bigotry towards the professors that are not, and the attacks that are made on them, and their lack of understanding of the varied viewpoints, which I thought was just completely awful.
You want to know what's wrong with academia? That's it. There.
Yeah, not open to different viewpoints.
They're not.
So anyway,
and that's how they do their hiring too. They do their hiring in groups like that. So. All right.
We do like the Sutherland Institute.
Yeah, we do.
So,
we do.
We found them recently, and they have some really good stuff.
And we've had William on several times before, and he always has something good to say.
Yeah, they do their research. And I would encourage people to subscribe to their newsletter because it's really good.
Right, they do. All right, we have a prayer to open us up with?
I do. The prayer for peace today. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. God of peace, bring your peace to our violent world. Peace in the hearts of all men and women, and peace among the nations of this earth. Turn to your way of love those whose hearts and minds are consumed with hatred. Strengthen us all in hope, and give us the wisdom and the courage to work tirelessly for a world where true peace and love reign among the nations and in the hearts of all. Amen.
Amen. Thank you very much, Gina. We will be right back after these messages with Mike Gonzalez from the Heritage Foundation. You're listening to Faith on Trial on the Iowa Catholic Radio Network. And we're back. You're still listening to Faith on Trial on the Iowa Catholic Radio Network, and we have with us right now Mike Gonzalez, who is a senior fellow at the Heritage Foundation, and he talks about all sorts of things, including foreign policy issues. And he's written an interesting piece that appeared this past week, or maybe 10 days ago, on the CRT. We've talked a lot before about CRT, but it's kind of faded from our memories a little bit. At least it's faded from the news pages, but I guess it's ready to make a roaring return. So welcome, Mike, and can you tell us a little bit about what is going on here?
Thank you very much, Deacon, Gina, for having me on again. It's always a pleasure to come in and speak to you. It was a piece that I wrote about the founders, the pioneers of critical race theory. That's what we mean by CRT, holding a summer school. They held a week-long series of lectures that they have, and it was attended by teachers. It was attended by a lot of educators. In fact, they went out of their way to give K-12 teachers and principals a discount on the attendance of the week-long summer school in Nashville, Tennessee, which shows you that it's a complete lie when they tell you it's not in schools. Of course it's in schools, and they very much want it to be in schools, and that's why they have teachers. That's why they focus on teachers and educators. And what they're doing is, as you said, they're planning this comeback. Now, this is their fifth summer school. They started in 2020 when CRT had its big moment with the killing of George Floyd, and it was because the gatekeepers of our cultural institutions surrendered and accepted a lot of bad ideas. That was at the height, the apogee of critical race theory. This time, and maybe you want to get into this, this time the meeting was really very negative. They were bemoaning the fact that America's fighting back, that they're fighting opposition. And indeed, the big news today is, and I'll stop here, is that Ford, the car maker, has just announced that it's going to abandon the Human Rights Campaign's big LGBTQIA index, which does so much damage. So DEI is on the run, but it's on the run in the private sector, not in universities and not in the administration.
All right, let's just go back for a minute and kind of remind everybody of what CRT really was, what it was all about, and what it was doing to our children when they were hearing all of this and getting indoctrinated with all of this?
So critical race theory is a continuation of a German critical theory, which is a discipline which aims at revolutionizing society by dismantling the cultural givens, the traditions, the norms. And it's very open about doing that. In the U.S., the addition has been race because we're obsessed with race. And they say that our reigning philosophy is white supremacy, and which must be dismantled. And by white supremacy, they don't mean ugly white supremacists, which exist, who exist. Obviously, we all meet racist people. We're likely never going to get rid of racists, just like we won't be able to get rid of murderers and rapists altogether. We just don't need to pass laws against them. But to them, they say, well, no, that's not really what matters. Racism is embedded in American culture, and so we need to get rid of American culture. So that really is what critical race theory says and does, and it does it through different means. They based the idea that America is that we're systemically racist. This is a big thing, and their basis for that is the existence of disparities, racial disparities, which do exist in all cultural indicators, from median household income to educational attainment to poverty rates to incarceration. And we can talk about why those disparities exist and what we can do to alleviate them and eliminate them. But I put to you and to your listeners that CRT will do nothing to eliminate or even shrink the disparities.
No, what it seems to do is it seems to increase the division between our people.
Very much so. No, it actually uses what divisions there are there. We are a multi-ethnic society. I don't know your last name, so my last name is Gonzalez. Obviously, originated in Spain.
Manno, Italian.
Well, there you go. Probably Irish. So we're very multi-ethnic, and we have to take extra care to make sure we're united as one people. I was at a ballpark last night with my son, and in the seventh inning, we all got up and sang "Take Me Out to the Ball Game," and that is something only Americans do. It shows that we're a people. This is something very small, obviously, singing "Take Me Out to the Ball Game," but there we had 35,000 people all getting up and smiling at each other and singing a little ditty in the seventh inning stretch, and that's what we need is these uniting. This is very small, but it could be small, medium, big. CRT does the opposite. It says, well, you shouldn't sing, "Take Me Out to the Ball Game," because baseball is racist, like everything else in America is racist, and it should be celebrated, and we should be dismantling everything.
Yeah, I was talking to somebody about baseball the other day. I'm a kind of a big fan, and we're talking about racism. And the subject came up with the old Negro Leagues, and I opined to this person. I don't know if she believed it or not, but I thought that and this is just an aside, the greatest pure talent of baseball players was in the Negro Leagues at one time, and when they integrated with the national and American leagues, they took that natural talent that they had for the game, and they moved it mainstream. And that was back, in 48, something like that? And how people can still say that's racist, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, that's, in fact, baseball, and you're absolutely right, Satchel Paige, people think that he fully threw a fastball consistently above 100 miles an hour.
Cool Papa Bell? Turn off the light in the in his hotel room and be in bed before it got dark? I mean, these were amazing players.
And we did have systemic racism back then. That was racism. To have a Negro League, not to allow, Black Americans to participate in the national pastime along with white Americans or with Americans from Latin America, from Cuba, who came and played. That was awful, horrid, terrible. But we got rid of it. We as a country, we look upon that with horror. That's right, we should. This shows you how we advance We have progressed, something that the promoters of critical race theory would never admit.
Yeah, we've seen the errors of our ways, and one of the things that we've done is we've always tried to correct them to form, as they say, the more perfect union. You know, we come together and we admit what happened. I mean, look at the Civil War, you know, to end slavery. You know, we had a scourge in the country, and we finally ended it.
Yeah, no, I agree, and so we need to celebrate that and find how we did that and replicate that in the other areas of life.
But it seems to me what CRT now is doing is trying to create that division again, so that people, especially our young people, really don't believe in the ideals of America anymore. They think of America as being something different than it is, maybe something that might have been 100 years ago in its views of race and things like that. But now it sounds like from your column that this is they're going to try and head it back to the schools again.
Well, they're never going to give up. You know, they have been at this for decades. Critical race theory was started in 1989. That's when it got its name, and when it became organized. But it even goes back earlier because the writings began in the 1970s and the 1980s. So yeah, they have been at it for a long time. What we need to do is never, you know, be on guard. Do not allow racial divisions. Do not allow people to use racial divisions to get rid of our culture and bring in another culture, which is what it is. At the end of the day, it's anti-capitalism. It says, it makes all these promises about social justice and all these things that are written in the sand, because getting rid of capitalism, which is, I have another column, it's going to come out tomorrow, exactly on this issue, related to Robin DiAngelo. You know, if you listen to her, she would say that what she's against is capitalism, because capitalism is bad and racist and rewards the wrong criteria. So let's not be fooled. You know, this is not about social justice. This is not about helping people of any color.
Yeah, this seems to me it goes back to the old Frankfurt School, which is kind of Marxist-leaning.
Oh, completely. No, it was the Frankfurt School that came up with critical theory. Max Horkheimer, the third director of the Frankfurt School, properly called the Institute for Social Research, he had the 1936 essay, Critical Theory and Traditional Theory, and from that came critical legal studies, and from critical legal studies came critical race theory. They don't hide it. They use it in the title.
Yeah. All right, so this conference that they had, or this summer school thing, this is trying to get people geared up to continue to push this in the schools?
Well, as I said, yes. But as I said, and they had big names there. They had really big names. Kimberly Crenshaw, one of the founders of critical race theory, and the woman that gave it its name, Cheryl Harris, was there. Michael Eric Dyson was there. And they really concentrated on the pushback, on people like me, people like you, people like Chris Rufo, who how do they get around that? How do they get around the American people? And how do they still have these things? You have these evil ideology come into our schools, despite the fact that parents are fighting this.
And our legislators are fighting this. And I've noticed that there are stories about how teachers are trying to subrogate or move beyond the legislation, or try to teach this theory or indoctrinate the children in a subversive way that they can't be accused of breaking the law. At conferences like this, I'm sure, help them understand how to do that. The thing that's astonishing to me is that you advertise a conference like this and a teacher's like, oh, yeah, I'm going. I'd love to have the names of the teachers here in Iowa who were in attendance.
Well, I think you can find it online. I'll send you the link.
Good. Thank you.
What was interesting was the companies that were endorsing this, that were funding this, and the local district governments in local governments in the South, that were funding this conference, which required a lot of money. And so, I think people should know about this.
Now, how much of this is being pushed right now because of the upcoming election?
No, I think that they this is election free. This is something they do. As I said, they've done it every year since 2020. Election year, not election year. I think that they have a long game. Whoever wins, they're going to continue to push their ideas no matter what.
Yeah.
It sounds like from your article that when Kimberly Crenshaw started this conference on an annual basis in 2020, they used the George Floyd incidences to promote it and bring people together. And they thought, this is it. We've got a great opportunity. And we all remember how cancel culture really helped to endorse critical race theory and silence people speaking against it. But your article indicated that there's not so much the opportunity anymore, and the organizers were expressing quite a bit of dread and how they could re-energize the movement. So, is it a dying theory? Are the people who spread the truth winning? How do you see? We're
wising up to what's going on.
Right. How do you see this?
Well, as I hinted at before, I made an allusion to this. I think in the private sector, as evidenced by Fourth Actions today, in the private sector, companies are beginning to realize that you go woke, you go broke. So they're walking away from this. This is not at all happening now. This is George Mason University in Virginia is planning to have a big LGBTQIA event next week, I believe. Somebody sent me an email about that. I have to look at it. So schools are doubling down, and the Biden administration, the Biden-Harris administration, is doubling down. They're not abandoning this. This is their mother's milk. They have been. Obama was the first president, the first administration to introduce these ideas and to policymaking. Clinton didn't do this. Clinton was very liberal president, but he didn't do this. And obviously Carter didn't do this. It was Obama who began this. And then Biden really put it on steroids. Not because Biden necessarily believed in this. Biden, every time he talked about equity, he was speaking a foreign language. And you could tell a language that he had been told to mouth these words. In fact, Biden's record is one of a racist politician all his life. But his handlers, as we now know, because he's had to step down from running for president because unfortunately, because he's a president, he's mentally enfeebled, cognitively enfeebled. He was told to do these things, so there was a lot of policymaking driven by these ideas in the last 3 years. For 4 years now.
So, Mike, important to us here at this program, I suppose, is how do you see this divisive ideology spreading as contrary to the way people of faith live their lives?
It is now our orthodoxy, even though companies are walking away from it. If you had just been to business school and you join the C-suite of a company, it is a matter of you have to accept the fact that you promote these ideas if you want to be promoted, if you want to get ahead. If you want to become CEO, you have to appoint a chief diversity officer and say that the chief diversity officer does great work and more money should be given to that department and they should have a larger staff. Not because you believe in it, but because you want to get ahead. So we have a lot of people who are not believers in any of this, and most Americans, by a large margin, are not Marxists. They just go along with ideas that they don't know they're Marxists and going along because they don't want to hear it. When I come into a room or when I speak about it, what is this guy talking about? I don't want to hear this. This clangs. This gets in the way of my success. So this is really how it spreads, and it's why we're going to have to fight this at a political level. This is a cultural fight that first needs to be fought politically.
And of course, what that means is that the average citizen out there who's listening to this has to know what's going on, has to be knowledgeable of this, has to be curious enough to ask some questions and to go places like the Heritage Organization website where you can find all of this information.
Yeah, I mean, heritage.org, the Heritage Foundation where I work, we talk a lot about this. We devote a lot of attention and focus in policy formulation to all these things. Heritage.org. I've also written books about it. My last book was Next Gen Marxism, what it is and how to combat it. And it's really, I wrote it with Catherine Gorka, Next Gen Marxism. We talk about these.
We had her on the program one time. Your co-author.
Oh, yeah. She was a great co-author.
Yeah, she's a great guest too. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, this is the way to find out about this. We trust us. We've done our best to expose it.
Yeah, and we're in a democracy, and that puts an obligation on the citizens to know what it is that is going on in their country and in their communities, and to react accordingly, like a Christian should react. But we're pretty much out of time right now, Mike, and we're going to have to leave it go at that. And I'm glad you mentioned the website. It's heritage.org, that people can find your writings and other writings up there on the same topic, and we certainly appreciate it. And we're glad we're talking before you went on the air. We're talking about your visit with the Pope the other day, so we're glad you had an opportunity to visit with His Holiness in Rome, and hope maybe you taught him a lesson or two.
Well, I only had like 15 seconds with him. I spoke to him in Spanish. It was fantastic to be with the Holy Father at the Vatican. Yeah. I'm not going to lie.
Well, I've never had the opportunity to do that, and I've always kind of wondered if I was going to do any traveling to go to what I call headquarters over there and see what it's all like. Yeah. Michael, thank you for joining us again today. We certainly appreciate it, and we will have you back. We always do. So
thank you.
Wait for our call. Certainly. Thank you. All right, Michael Gonzalez, a senior fellow at the Heritage Foundation. Thank you very much for joining us today, and we will be right back after these messages. You're still listening to Faith on Trial on the Iowa Catholic Radio Network. And we're back. You're still listening to Faith on Trial on the Iowa Catholic Radio Network. We have with us right now William Duncan, who is a legal fellow at the Sutherland Institute in I think that's in Utah, isn't it?
That's right.
Okay.
Salt Lake
City, Utah. Very good. All right. So he's a columnist there too. He writes a column every once in a while for their webpage, and wrote an interesting one the other day about UCLA and how they're. I guess the example they're giving us is one of bigotry. So I'll let you explain all that, and then we'll have some questions for you.
Okay. Well, again, thanks for letting me come and talk with you. I appreciate
certainly.
your time. And
we appreciate the value you add to the conversation. That's why we have you back all the time.
Well, thank you. That's kind. This particular story was pretty startling to me, and as soon as I saw it, I thought, well, this is, you sometimes wonder, what am I going to write about that's going to be interesting, but this one was an easy call. The Becket Fund, which is a great religious freedom
yes, we've had them on.
They've been great. They alerted us to this case, and they were describing a situation in California, and it's arisen out of these protests of kind of anti-Zionist is the way they would describe it, anti-Israel protests. And this was on the college campus of UCLA, so it's a state school. And at UCLA, one of the things that happened as these protesters had occupied a part of the campus, they initiated a system where they would in order to cross the portion they were occupying to get to some of your classes or library or other buildings on campus, you had to have some kind of identification. And you got the identification by saying, I'm against Israel, I'm against Zionism, and then say, okay, now you can pass through. Well, of course, if they knew that students were Jewish, they would try and demand that of them. And, of course, those students, the Jewish students, couldn't, and others, for religious and other reasons, couldn't agree to make that, statement of faith. and so they were excluded from parts of campus. And there were examples in this case and the facts of the case of people being unable to take tests, unable to access facilities at the school, unable to go to class. And this was happening because largely the particular instances that were highlighted in this case were Jewish, and they were basically barred from parts of campus because they were Jewish. Now, the students represented by Becket Fund challenged the university because the university wasn't doing enough, really wasn't doing much of anything at this point to prevent this from happening, essentially allowing these protesters to control part of campus. And so a couple of weeks ago, the district court judge, the federal trial judge, ruled that the UCLA had failed to provide equal access to all of its facilities, and in this case was essentially treating non-religious students who were able to access all parts of campus versus religious students, particularly Jewish students, who were not solely because of their beliefs. And the court said that's unconstitutional. The university needs to ensure access to all parts of campus for all, without any regard to a person's race or religion, or in this case, particularly religion. And so I wanted to write about that because it was just so startling. But I think one of the things that stood out in reading the opinion was that the court, in kind of these very crisp, brief sentences, says, in 2024, in the United States of America, Jews were excluded from parts of campus. It's really stark when you think in those terms of really how radical what was happening was. And so I wanted to highlight and make people aware of what exactly was going on. It's not necessarily widespread in every place, but any instance of this, of course, is reprehensible.
Well, it seems we've had examples in other universities as well.
Well, that's right. In fact, pretty extreme ones in Harvard and Columbia and other schools. I think last time we talked about this issue, one of the things that we noticed that was kind of interesting is that this hasn't happened as much, or really, there's very few instances of anything close to this happening on religious universities, which I think is really positive. It suggests that those universities probably are doing a better job in inculcating in their campus culture of a feeling of being welcoming to those who have different opinions about things, and so that was pretty positive. But so I think we have talked about this, but you're right. And I think some of that seems to have died down. It's hard to know if that may be because there are less people on campus right now. But as the school year starts up again, it'll be interesting to see whether some of these kind of extreme protests begin again, or if the universities kind of learn their lessons and will handle the situation better.
Oh, so what you're describing to me sounds like a radical group of individuals decided to maintain their own governance on the campus. And until the courts got involved, the university did nothing to dissuade or break that up.
Right.
Does that sound right?
The nature of that's exactly right. That's the nature of the concern. When you think about it, the Constitution only applies to government action in the sense that, if I don't let my kids say whatever they want to say at home, that I may be a bad parent, but I'm not violating the Constitution. If some organization, as reprehensible as they may be, says, well, we're only going to let these people join our club, unfortunately, they're allowed to do that. But this implicates the state itself, which is operating this university and not protecting all of its students, allowing for some students who have some views, and particularly in this case some religious views, to be able to access all of campus and all of its services, and not allowing others. And this kind of thing has happened in a number of states, not this particular scenario, which is probably the most extreme version, but this practice of allowing benefits to some non-religious people and not other religious people. And it goes back, of course, in the United States to the Blaine Amendments that tried to keep Catholic students from being able to or families from being able to access Catholic schools by trying to deny the benefits available to other schools, to Catholic schools, and so we haven't completely lived down that practice from the past.
Yeah, there are still states with little blame rules.
Correct. We hope, given some of the really positive decisions from the U.S. Supreme Court, that those will eventually be completely formally struck down, but they do exist.
Yeah.
And the same principle, even if the implication of it is a little bit different in this particular case, but the facts are different. I mean, the same principle is at work here.
So did the lawsuit address any kinds of consequences for the students who were violating the rights of their fellow students, or were there any consequences invoked by the university against those students?
That's a really good question. The court did not, and I think the reason is because this is the very first stage, and what they were trying to do is to immediately resolve the problem of Jewish students, not having access to their classes and other parts of campus. And they've issued an injunction. The case can go forward, and presumably the state can argue, well, we've got a solution. The injunction should be lifted because we solved the problem. But they'll have to show that they've done that. At this point, the university was essentially saying, "Well, we can't do anything about it. Sorry." And the court said, "No, that's not good enough. You are the university. You're the ones who provide access to all of its services. You've got to ensure that happens." So that's what you're asking about is really the next step in the suit to determine what exactly the university is going to do to ensure that all Jewish students and other students have equal access.
It appears to me as I'm watching these things from around the country that there's kind of a passive acceptance of anti-Semitism by the leaders of these universities. And we just had on the segment before you a gentleman from the Heritage Foundation, Mike Gonzalez, and he was talking about CRT, how it's trying to rev itself up again. How much of this do you suppose has to do with this CRT mentality that still is pervasive on some college campuses?
I think that's a great question, and there's been a lot of speculation, and I think it's pretty convincing that there's a pervasive way of looking at the world and of differences that seems to be prevalent right now, where the way it's usually phrased is that there's oppressors and there's the oppressed, and particularly students who've probably been around this kind of thinking for a good part of their lives, and certainly often in a college setting, have come to convince themselves that one group or one sort of ideological category in this particular dispute, the Palestinian cause, is the oppressed group, and the Jewish students are part of the oppressor group. And of course, it doesn't make any logical sense or doesn't have any basis in fact. But that way of thinking is pretty pervasive, and it's one reason why I think some states have pushed back against this idea of everybody has to be split up into sort of tribal categories and given benefits or humiliated because of what group they're in, and I do think that is definitely a portion of that. I think we know that anti-Semitism in particular seems to be uniquely virulent as an ideology, and it seems, no matter what, unfortunately, to keep creeping back up. But I think you're right that the particular intellectual idea that we understand the world best in terms of groups at odds with each other, kind of like our Darwinian a fight against one another to become supreme. That type of that way of thinking has been, I'm sure that's contributed to a lot of the most nasty controversies we see right now.
William, so you see this as a persecution of faith. Is it this particular UCLA case is recognizable to me because there were visual images when the radicalization was going on. But are there other schools that are in the same situation? Do you know of any other lawsuits against schools or individuals on campuses that are in this situation?
That's a great question. I think that I'm not aware of other lawsuits. I think partially because the situation at UCLA was so marked, and the university, some of the other universities haven't responded well, but I think that public pressure led some, like Columbia and Harvard, to finally do something. And in some cases that resulted from pressure that caused a change in administration that was willing to kind of face up to the problem. And in some ways, I think it's sort of interesting. I wouldn't have guessed, if you'd asked me a month ago, I wouldn't have said, I think UCLA has the biggest problem. It was sort of flying under the radar. But the problem was, the reason it was, is because nothing was being done at all. There was no pressure being put. And so the Jewish students there had really no recourse until this lawsuit was brought. So I think... I think that's why this situation looked a little bit different. But I do think that given this particular lawsuit, if as the semester begins again, as the school year begins again, we may very well see similar lawsuits because the courts have created, or the court in this case has created I think a pretty compelling approach to ensuring that universities don't allow this continued abuse, really, of some of its students to go on.
Okay, so outside the purview of this article, maybe you're aren't privy to this information, so just tell me if that's the case. But how has it affected enrollment by Jewish students in these schools that were really publicized for their riots? Yeah,
I don't know the answer, but I've seen anecdotally some stories, news stories that suggest that that's a serious problem, and that you can imagine. I mean, as a parent, when you send your children to school, particularly college. I mean, college is it's a little bit of a hothouse. And of course that's intentional. It's supposed to be a setting where, at least in the past, we used to use the term in loco parentis, and you think of the colleges as not being parents, but kind of standing in the parents' role a little bit to ensure that students are safe, that they're given a great opportunity. They're a little more independent than they were, in previous parts of their lives, which is reasonable given that they're getting older. But that the university wanted to ensure that happened in a setting where, the right kinds of circumstances for learning would occur. This is antithetical to that understanding. It's some students are mistreated. They may be identified as Jewish looking. What a terrible way of a terrible experience for a student to have on campus, or demand that they have to take a certain position in order to access parts of campus. And I think that's pretty stark, and I'm sure it will have the effect of leading parents and students to say, gosh, I want to find a school that's going to be a lot more conducive to the actual learning process. I think at the same time, I know schools are struggling a little bit with the unrelated question of what do they do now that the funding that was ramped up during the COVID period is now sort of expiring, and they're supposed to be going back to normal. Some of the schools, I think, had depended on that extra money coming in. So I think a number of things could be at work. So this could provide a rethinking of the way colleges work, and hopefully for the best.
Yeah, just some of the anecdotal evidence that I've heard is that there are a lot of Jewish students now applying at Catholic universities, Catholic colleges.
Interesting.
Someplace they'd feel safe, yeah.
Yeah, well, as a mother of children who are in college and gone through college, I mean, literally it takes me the first 30 days that they're there to feel comfortable that they're safe and they're doing the right stuff and they're focused on the right stuff. And in fact, they tell me to get new hobby, leave them alone. But when I watch these stories, my heart just broke for the parents. The kids could say, yeah, we're safe, and yes, but we're watching on TV this horrific incidents going on your campus. It can't be a very comforting place to be for a parent.
I think think you're exactly right, and no one should have to do that. We sometimes say, well, college is a place to challenge. You're thinking, and all of that is true, but this has nothing to do with those kinds of things of learning new things and learning good habits of studying, and that's the kind of thing that ought to be happening in college study. This is essentially letting bullies take over campuses and act out these ideological beliefs that some groups are better than others, and that has no place in a university setting.
Yeah.
And one of the things we really want to encourage is our children to continue their faith while they're at college campuses, because so often they lose their faith there. And how difficult would it be for a student to practice their faith when they know that everyone's watching them walk into the synagogue or to that particular faith institution?
Watching them with cross purposes.
Right, with nefarious outcomes, yes.
Right, yeah. And that's why I would think that this would be a benefit to Christian and religious schools, that the Jewish students would feel safe there because it's built around faith.
True.
Yeah.
True.
Right.
All right, so what else do we know about UCLA? What are they doing now? Are they trying to get this all behind them, or are they still fighting?
Are we appealing?
Are we appealing the case?
Yeah, there have been some mixed signals about that. The university at one point seemed to suggest they might appeal, but which I think would be a mistake, because this kind of lawsuit is really a wake-up call, and once you realize, oh gosh, we let things get out of hand and we need to fix it, that's the right approach. And
you don't want an appeals court pounding you into the ground at this point. Right.
But on the other hand, hopefully what the university takes from this is just a good reminder. We can't let these things spiral out of control. And there's a natural, because we're in the spring-summer sort of break period where less people are on campus, that some of this may naturally, has naturally died down a little. We don't see nearly as much about the protests on campus as being as aggressive as they were. So hopefully...
Except at Columbia. Columbia seems to be growing the protest back.
Well, right. And that, maybe that's another situation they should probably learn from, is if the university doesn't sort of become, very proactive in protecting all of its students, then the situation is very hard to contain. And so I'm hopeful that that's what happens at UCLA, that they'll say, okay, well, whatever we're going to do about this lawsuit, we need to make sure that we're protecting all of our students, and that we don't allow this kind of thing to start up again as the semester begins, right about now.
All right, people can find you at Sutherland Institute, all one word, .org, correct?
That's correct.
And you can find out what's going on there and read all of his columns as they get posted. So, Bill, we appreciate you joining us again today. Unfortunately, we're always running out of time somewhere along the line, and we have to let you go. But we do thank you for joining us, and we'd invite people to join you on your website at SutherlandInstitute.org. And until next time, thank you for coming.
Thanks so much for having me.
Certainly. God bless you. And we will be right back after these messages. You are still listening to Faith on Trial on the Iowa Catholic Radio Network. And we're back to wrap up. You're still listening to Faith on Trial on the Iowa Catholic Radio Network. And Gina, another interesting program today. I know I always say they're interesting, but they are to me anyway.
Two of my favorite guests.
Yeah, they are great. And they talked on much the same thing, if you think about it.
Well, it's just how
these things happen.
Right. A court case created by an ideology that's spreading, And one of the things it doesn't take into account is what we as Catholics understand, that, that we're all God's people. We're one family, and it's destructive to our society to break us into labels and categories of any kind. The critical race theory is so destructive to our society. And I thought we always prided ourselves in America as being a melting pot. And I think that experiment is still ongoing, and I think it is offensive to certain people who want to gain power by dividing us. But as long as we remember that we're all God's people and we are one big giant family,
that's right.
I think we'll be okay.
That's right. but we got to remember
But it's good to
that.
know that the courts are on our side.
Yeah, and the courts are on our side, and you can see where you have a lot of this passive acceptance by the administration of all this stuff that's been going on campuses, because this is kind of some of the stuff that their professors anyway, have been preaching about,
Right.
you know, CRT.
Well, and that whole story shocks me because I can't imagine being a teacher wanting the very best for your students, because 99% of the teachers, that's all they want. That's their goal in life, is to help educate our students and take care of the children. And that they would look at a conference that taught CRT and say, yeah, sign me up.
Mm-hmm.
How did we get there?
That's playing in the hands of all these people. And the interesting thing is, we talked with Mike mentioned the Frankfurt School. You know,
we had a program about that at one point. And
what happened with the Frankfurt School is when they all started to immigrate to the United States, where did they go? Columbia University. And it's still happening at Columbia now. They're the first one. Yeah. They have a long history of this. So we'll see what happens. But anyway, now, the other thing I wanted to bring up is this idea that Facebook, Zuckerberg, was complaining publicly now that it was the Biden administration that forced them to censor certain things over the past couple of years.
Can I ask why that's news? Didn't we know that?
Well, I think it may be the first time that he's admitted it.
So did that mean, they had him up at Congress. Did he lie under oath when where are we in all of this? I just think it's so odd that he's made
being
this.
gaslit.
Right.
Yeah.
It's crazy that he knew that it was going on and has been asked about it and didn't think it was a bad thing at the time that he was doing it. I don't understand how you can be an American and not honor the free speech.
I don't.
And in contrast to what's that, Pavel something, who owns Telegraph, another social media
Across the pond, as they
site,
say.
Yeah, that was just arrested for not censoring. It's all very extreme in my eyes.
What bothers me is those people out there that claim to be journalists. Now, I have a degree in journalism. That was what my undergraduate study was about.
I'm imagining you were taught very different than
I was.
More contemporary.
I was taught by Jesuits, first of all, so I don't know how... They were different, but I don't know how different.
But they understood journalism.
They understood journalism, and you understood that a good journalist has to be a curious person, has to be able to ask questions, see something and realize that this doesn't all fit. So what is it? But nobody seems to want to do that anymore. They just let things go. They act more as propagandists for one side or the other, as opposed to true journalists, that the old muckrakers, that would get in the muck with everybody, try to figure out what's going on.
Exactly.
Yeah, but they don't do that anymore.
It's not the way it works.
No.
Unfortunately.
And unfortunately, we're out of time again. So we're going to have to end with our Defender's Prayer here. Say, Michael the Archangel, defend us in battle, be our protection against the wickedness and snares of the devil. May God rebuke him, we humbly pray, and do thou, Prince of the heavenly host, by the power of God, thrust into hell Satan and all the evil spirits who prowl about the world, seeking the ruin of souls. Amen. That's it for this week. We will be back again next week with another edition of Faith on Trial. In the meantime, make sure you go to church and take your kids.
Our freedom of conscience and religion is being challenged by laws and regulations imposed by secular society. Faith on Trial with Defender of the Faith, Deacon Mike Manno. Faith on Trial on Iowa Catholic Radio, iowacatholicradio.com, and the Iowa Catholic Radio app.
Support for Faith on Trial and Iowa Catholic Radio provided in part by Imogene Ingredients.